We want people to be marinated in the tools and the instruction that we're giving before they send us a very large check.
Always a clearer plan of okay, these are the questions that people are asking at the outset.
I love that change of perspective, that reframing from episodes to assets.
I'm not just barking math at you, we have 70% of this and blah, blah, blah. Wrap a story around everything you're doing, and that will help before you sell.
Does marketing and content creation ever feel hard and time-consuming? What if it didn't have to be that way?
Join Rob Drummond,
Matthew Bliss,
and me, Pete Daly-Dickson, your ideal companions on the journey to a value-first approach to business growth, here on Help Before You Sell. And on today's episode, we're joined by Gord Vickman. Gord is from Canada. He's a former award-winning radio morning show producer and host, and he now oversees the podcast network, the entire podcast network for Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach. And both of those names will be familiar if you're a regular listener of the show, as we've name-checked them quite a few times, seeing as they really are the consummate example of helping before you sell. So it's quite an incredible pleasure, really, and an immense privilege to get to go backstage, if you like, with Gord today and get real actionable insights on how help before you sell can impact your business. And personally, I'm looking forward to learning how to do podcasts properly from a bona fide expert. Gord, welcome to the Help Before You Sell podcast.
Peter, it's my pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of your program. You guys do great work, and I'm really happy to be here.
Listen, before we kind of dive into the conversation, there's something that we do need to address, and that is your personal responsibility for this show, this podcast being in existence. And then you're looking at me like the rabbit in the headlights, like, why? Where are we going with this?
Pete's digging out all our secrets here.
Yes. Yeah. So back in April last year, so coming on for a year, you and I had a Zoom call, and that was on the back of me listening to your excellent podcast with Dan Sullivan himself, podcast Payoffs. And there were some things that you mentioned in a few of the beginning episodes, and I chatted with you and you gave me a lot of advice and encouragement that resulted in Activate Your Podcast coming into existence, where we help business owners start a podcast, and we do it by being their conversation partner. And that was the episode right at the beginning of your podcast with Dan, where you talked about having the quarterback and having that conversation partner. So we got Activate Your Podcast up and going, and then we put our heads together and say, well, if we're helping people start podcasts, we really need a podcast ourselves. So that's where Help Before You Sell came. So that's the lineage, if you like, from that conversation that you and I had back in April. So on behalf of Rob, Matt, and I, thanks.
You're very welcome. I love to help before you sell, and I wasn't trying to sell you anything. I mean, granted, it'd be wonderful to have you in our coach community, but I love audio and I love radio, and if anybody wants to talk to me about this stuff, I will talk until my head rolls off my shoulders. So I was glad to be there, and I was glad that I could be a little tiny portion of your launch and your success.
Now, podcasts obviously aren't the only way that Strategic Coach helps their clients before they sell, but it's a pretty big part, isn't it?
Sure. We give a lot away for free, and Dan and Coach is not, for those who are not familiar with Strategic Coach, we are an organization. We are the global leader for entrepreneurial coaching. If you are a successful, talented, ambitious entrepreneur who's excited about the future, but feeling a bit stuck in terms of how to get there, we have the framework, the tools, and the community to help you get there. So that just lays out the foundation for who we are and what we do. We give away a lot through podcasts. We have a lot of tools that are downloadable online. I got to give credit to a gentleman named Joe Polish. Some of you might be familiar with him. He created the preeminent marketing organization in the world called Genius Network. And Joe's thing, I've known Joe for a very long time. He's a friend and a mentor. And he says, whatever you are trying to sell, put information in front of it. And Joe was, in his own words, a dead broke carpet cleaner, couldn't figure out how to build his carpet cleaning business. So he created a guide about how to avoid scams with carpet cleaning. I don't clean carpets. I've cleaned a few carpets in my life, begrudgingly. So, but so he was in this industry, and he said, there's a lot of scams going on. So I'm going to create this thing, and I'm going to go undercover, and I'm going to educate people on how to avoid the common scams. And then now he's Joe Polish, this legendary, giant in the marketing industry, because he figured out that if you put information ahead of anything you're selling, now you're way ahead of the game, because people will have an indication that you're not only the person who's trying to sell me something, but you're also the person who's trying to educate me, and you're going to take care of me, basically, because who do we buy from? We buy from people we like, know, and trust. So strategic coach, we give away a lot of information before we're getting into that, like deep down the funnel, because we want people to be marinated, in Dan's own words. We want people to be marinated in the tools and the instruction that we're giving before we start trying to suggest to them that they send us a very large check. So putting information in front of the things that you're trying to sell is a wonderful way to have people be more educated before they can get into those kinds of discovery calls and whatnot, because then you're talking to someone who knows what you're doing and they know what you're offering. And then it's just a more intelligent way to go about things than going cold.
They also understand your lexicon. They understand the frameworks that you use. They're already speaking your language by the time they get into that stage.
Yeah, and Rob, and you mentioned language. That's a wonderful segue to the next thing is. Coach has a language, and the people who are in Coach and the people who have been in Coach, many of them for decades, there is a lexicon, there is a language, and you can all. Then I've spoken to members before, and they've said, like, I met someone at a conference, and they said something, and I said to them, "You're in strategic coach, aren't you?" And they're like, "Yeah, how did you know?" It's like, you just said this thing, and you would never have said that thing if you had not been in strategic coach. So it's a language, it's a community, it's a cult, maybe, but it's a beautiful cult. It's not the terrible kind, but people in our community do have a language, and that's what we've marinated them in. And the way that we produce our podcasts is our effort to do that. That's like the first step.
Mm. I actually had firsthand experience of that. I was having a conversation with a guest for one of the other podcasts that I host, my own Not a Straight Line podcast, and very successful business owner. And he used the term unique ability in the course of the conversation. And then a few minutes later, I said, you haven't been in strategic coach by any chance, have you? And sure enough, he had, because that's obviously a core pillar of strategic coach.
Yeah, it's one of the core tenets of Coach is unique ability. Everybody has one. You're born with it. It's innate. It's baked in. And when you work in your unique ability, you can't fail.
And how do you describe your unique ability?
Wow, great question. My unique ability, I believe, I've never actually gone through the process with Julia Waller, who's Shannon Waller's sister, who created it with her partners. I believe I'm a storyteller, and I'm very good at using words and language to describe what I want to do. I'm pretty good at organizing as well, and I feel as though I can articulate the things that I want to do after having done the work on the backstage myself in a way that is unique, entertaining, and engaging. And that is my unique ability.
Maybe the unique ability is almost like the intersection of those things that you've mentioned.
Yeah, I think there are people who have ideas. I mean, ideas are cheap. Execution is difficult. But being able to galvanize those that you need to bring your ideas into action, that's sort of a rare, I feel like I'm like patting myself on the back right now, but it's kind of a rare thing that someone has the ability to galvanize those around them and bring them into the fold and have them be excited about an idea that they may not have known about prior to 5 seconds ago. And that's one of the things I'm very good at, is I'm very good at galvanizing and leading teams. And that's why coach, when I came into coach, that was one of the things they recognized pretty quickly about me. And, so far so good for 7 years now that we've had a lot of success. Podcasting has had an ebb and a flow. The Apple iOS changes with the 17 launch, when everybody dropped by like 30% because they're not sending, this is like major tech stuff, but they're not sending episodes that you didn't listen to anymore. We saw a drop, like the whole industry saw a drop. And our efforts now are like, well, how do we reclaim those numbers? How do we get back to where we were before? Because Apple was calling those numbers not legitimate. And then the industry was not pleased about that, as they should be. We couldn't figure out why they had done that. Maybe it's because, Apple doesn't make any money when you fill up your phone with podcasts, but they make a lot of money when you fill up your phone with apps. So was it a storage issue? Nobody really knows. So, we set on that, and once again, we're kind of climbing back to where we were before with the numbers that we used to have. But podcasting, and I heard just yesterday that ebooks as well are seeing a bit of a dip right now. So all the content that you're using to help before you sell, it's sort of there's an ebb and a flow to it. Things that are working before might not work as well in the future, or new methods have to be discovered. But it's an interesting thing, people's attention, as you try and follow what people are paying attention to and reacting to that and predicting what can happen in the future. And it's not necessarily the easiest game, but it's a fun challenge, and for me, it's something that I enjoy. So I'm going to keep doing it until the wheels fall off, and that's that. Because I don't know what else I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this.
In my intro, Gord, I mentioned that you were previously a radio show producer and host. And I know that you kind of saw the rights from listening to your podcast. You kind of saw the writing on the wall as far as, that broadcast media was concerned. That was when you sort of made the pivot. But you didn't go from there straight to strategic coach. You set up your own company, didn't you? Some multimedia production. Have you always kind of had a help before you sell mindset and philosophy? What was your experience of helping before you sell, and maybe even selling before you help? So maybe kind of any nightmare stories of working with clients that hadn't kind of got the language and kind of been marinated in Gord's world before they became a client.
I mean, I'm certainly not the foremost expert, obviously, because otherwise I'd be living in a way bigger house than I live in right now if I was. As you can see, there's a wall behind me. And if I was the global leader in this, there wouldn't be a wall behind me. There'd be like, I don't know, 15 bikini babes in a pool. And my wife would be really pissed. So I'm not claiming to be the, like global foremost expert on helping before you sell. But I have, like you mentioned, Peter, I have a little bit of experience in terms of doing this. I did make the jump from radio. I saw the writing on the wall. And the interesting thing, I guess, was that I left at the absolute peak. I left at the top of the game. So our show was number one. It was a huge show. We had maybe like in the community that we were broadcasting in, it was called London, Ontario. Don't get mixed up with London. London, Ontario. They have a Thames River. It's basically like they're trying to copy what you guys are having over there, but it's been around for a couple 100 years. And I think it was, formed by the people who came from there. And we had about 1 million people listening to our show every day, and it was fun and it was interesting and I loved it. But I always like to look over the horizon. And when I looked over the horizon, I knew that advertising was changing. I knew that radio was probably not in the best position to be the place to be in the future. So I made the extremely difficult decision to walk away. And a lot of people said, "You're nuts. Why are you doing this? This is insane. You are the guy." I was media famous in the city that, like we would go out and we'd get free drinks and people would pay attention to us. But I knew that when I looked over the horizon, there were storm clouds, and I didn't see a future in it. So I walked away at the top of the game. And then, like you said, Peter, I started my own company, and I worked for a number of production companies doing audio audio production, post-production, live audio recording and whatnot. And then Coach came along, and there was an opportunity for me. I knew who Dan was. I didn't know a heck of a lot about him, but I had heard his name spoken amongst my friends who had companies. Like, he was this like mystical figure who was this guy, and I knew that he knew what he was talking about. So I was approached about the opportunity, and at first I said, well, I don't know. And then I learned more about it, and then I went through the interview process, and there were about 400 of them.
400 interviews or 400 people?
400 people and 400 interviews. It was an incredibly arduous thing.
Wow.
Because they knew that whoever this person was going to be working closely with Dan. So I feel as though they put me through the ringer because they didn't want to screw it up. Because if they hire the wrong person, then they have to admit to Dan that they hired the wrong person, and then they got to start all over again. So
was Dan involved in your hire?
Well, he was. And here's how it went. So I had like a phone interview, and it went really well. And then I had an in-person, and it went really well. And then I don't have a resume. I have an infographic. I designed it myself, and I gave it to them. And they were like, I found out later through people just now that have become my friends, they were like, this guy's a heavyweight. We can't just have him booking podcasts because he's going to get really bored, and then he's going to leave. So then there was another interview. Then there was another interview. Then there was another phone call. And I'm like, holy shit, this is going on forever. So they called me into one of the workshop rooms, and I sat down, and I feel like I was like friends with the people now who were interviewing me because it never ended. And then Dan walks in. I was like, oh, here we go. Here's the guy. It was like a video game, where you have to meet the final boss.
Yeah, the boss level.
Yeah, instead of like having to like defeat Dan Sullivan, I just had to impress him. So he already knew everything, and they had made their decision. I found out later. They knew that I was who they wanted to, take this podcast network that, in Dan's own words, was a gigantic mess because he was launching podcasts left and right, and there was nobody looking after them. There was nobody owning it. So he sat down. He's like, Sudbury, eh? So I'm from Sudbury, which is a very rough and tumble little nickel mining community about 4 hours north of Toronto, maybe 5, depends how you drive. And but I've been in Toronto now for a long time, 30 years. So we sat down, and he said, Sudbury. And then we started talking about nickel mining. And then I brought up a story about my grandfather. And then he told me about a story about his father. And then we talked about sushi. And then we talked about like all these different things that had absolutely nothing to do with the role at all. He never asked me a single question about what I knew or what I could offer. There was nothing like, tell me about yourself. There was none of that. We just talked about our families, and we talked about all kinds of oddball things. And then he stood up and he goes, well, just so you know, the answer is yes. And I said, come again? He's like, well, it's a job interview, right? Isn't that the word you want to hear? And then I said, okay. And then he left. He just walked out of the room. He said, oh, the answer is yes. And then he's like, see you Monday. And then I was like, okay. That was my interview process. My interview with Dan was chatting about nickel mining, grandfathers, rural cottages, sushi, home repair.
He was just checking he could talk to you, though, wasn't he? I think
that's what he was doing. He was just trying to figure out. Now Dan and I have a relationship. We're friends. He's clearly my boss, but we have a deeper relationship than that. But I asked him, I was like, what was that all years later? I was like, what was that interview all about? Because that was so weird. He said, I just wanted to confirm if you could tell a story. That's all I wanted to know. I wanted to know if you could engage in a conversation, not be boring, keep something going. That's all I wanted to confirm. And then you confirmed that. And once I knew that, then I stood up because I had other places to be. So I said yes. And then I walked away, and that was it.
That's such an interesting story, Gord. Thanks for sharing it. And it's interesting because we have a real conversation first mindset, philosophy. It's the bedrock of everything that we do at Activate Your Podcast and Help Before You Sell as well. And one of the things that we encourage people to do, regardless of whether they start a podcast with us or do it themselves, is to do it as you advised me a year ago, to do it in conversation with someone. So what advice, tips, strategies, techniques, insights, advice do you have about having these kind of conversations? I know that you have them one a month with Dan.
Yeah, for a business owner who is looking to help before they sell and wants to adopt, well, is listening to Pete say, the conversational approach is the way to go.
Absolutely. So don't script anything. You're going to be looking for people who can carry a conversation. That's the primal thing that you want to bring in. I hear a lot from people who say things like, well, I don't know if I can commit to this. I don't know if I can commit to doing this until the sun burns out. And then my answer is always, well, who has a pistol to your head that says you have to? Let's say you have an organization. You're a business owner. You have an organization. I say to people, are there 4 questions that you get asked all the time that you're totally sick of answering? And everybody always says yes. There's 4 questions that people always want to know. And I spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources speaking to these people on the telephone. I say, would you be able to commit to a 4-episode miniseries in which you spend 1 hour addressing in great detail one of the questions that people ask you in your business? So let's throw back to Joe Polish. We're talking about carpet cleaning. Like, how do I get my carpets clean? Okay, well, there's your first episode. How do I avoid scams? There's your second episode. How do I whatever? Once again, I'm not a carpet cleaner, so I don't know the intricacies of carpet cleaning, but I'm just using them as an example. So can you commit to that? Can you commit to a 4-episode miniseries which would address the 4 questions that you were tired of answering in the most detail that you can possibly answer them in? And then when someone calls you, so when you think about those things that live online, we're not thinking about episodes anymore. We're thinking about assets. So don't think about your podcast as episodes. Think about them as assets. These are audio assets that live online forever. Someone reaches out to you and they say, well, I have a question about this. And you say, I have an idea for you. These are the questions that, challenge people a lot. I have a 4-episode mini-series online available right now. Is that something that would be interesting to you, or is that not? If they say no, then fine, then carry on with what you've been doing before. If they say, oh yeah, I didn't even know you had that, that's great. So I have 4 episodes that will address all the concerns you have, answer them in great detail. You can rewind, you can listen to them on your own time, on your own dime, in the shower, when you're driving, anywhere. Is that something that would be interesting to you? The people who say yes you would say, okay, well, how long do you think it would take for you to get through those 4 episodes? Is a week reasonable, or is 2 weeks reasonable? 2 weeks. Okay. So I'll tell you what, 2 weeks from today, I'm going to send you another invite. We're going to get back together and you will be way more educated. You will be way more knowledgeable. You'll have a much deeper understanding of the things that we're going to be discussing if we're going to get into business together than you were before. And you can do it whenever you want. So the benefit is not for me. It's not like I'm pushing you away. Go listen to my 4-episode mini series because I don't want to talk to you. It's you do it on your time. So we don't have to spend your time doing this right now. So the benefit is actually to that person, not to you. But the benefit is actually for you because you don't have to waste your time either.
It's an automation of the conversation with that person.
Yeah. So I've always thought, like, why do people feel that they need to do this forever? If you're using it to help before you sell, then why don't you stop thinking about this as like a show that has to go on forever, but think about your episodes as assets, not episodes. And you have those, they live online, they're tools, and you've created them. Anyone can go there, learn about your business, start to begin that trust. They're sliding down the funnel. And then when the next time you talk to them, it's a different conversation than someone kind of coming in cold. So use that method. And it's really perplexing to me why more people don't use that strategy. We've done it for Dan's books. So Dan has, major market books and he does quarterly books. So his book, Who Not How, we did a podcast miniseries with his co-author, Ben Hardy. For The Gap in the Game, we did a 4-episode miniseries and we released that ahead of the book. So we teased what was coming up in the book, and we teased what you're going to learn in the book. The episodes did really well. The assets did really well. And even to this day, we're still shooting them out there and we're still sending them to people, and they're still selling books. So those are assets that live online forever. They're going to educate the people, going to help them before we're trying to sell anything to them. And you can think about this because there are no rules. You can think about podcasting in any which way you want. You can use it. It's your tool to use how you want. It doesn't have to be something you do for 25 years. You can use it to sell one specific thing. You can use it to sell, a series of things or whatever. But if you think about the things we're producing right now as assets and not episodes, then that will be something that you can use for client outreach in the future. Like this episode right now, if someone wants to learn about this, you have this now. Like once it gets published, this is an asset that lives online forever, and you can use it as long as you want because it never goes away.
Matt, you've been saying in recent episodes that I think people are confused over what a podcast is or has to be. And this is assumption that you did this kind of video studio with the books in the background and the and the full setup. And I don't think it has to be that. It could just be, as you say, 4 episodes that you reference.
You can do 4, you can do 8, you can do as many as you want. I mean, if you're doing a series where it's just stream of thought, it's a comedy show where you're just going out there to get your thoughts out, that's fine. But the medium has no rules. Like there's no rules for this. We're making this up as we go along, right? This is for us. We can do that. We can do whatever we want. We can literally do whatever we want. We can all take our shirts off right now. and that's fine. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. I want people to think outside the parameters of what they think this medium can be. And in the context of help before you sell, which is the focus of this program, what I'm suggesting is don't be intimidated by the longevity, by the
perception of longevity.
Don't be intimidated by that. If you only want to do 4 shows, that's okay, because you're putting information, like circling back the bookend, you're putting information, putting education before that which you're trying to sell to people. And this is a wonderful medium to do so because, like I mentioned, you have those assets on offer to the people who are calling you and asking the same 4 questions every single time. Would that be agreeable to you to educate yourself on the things that you want to know from me and my business? And again, if they say no, they're like, I don't want to do that. That you're like, okay, fine, then we'll do it the old fashioned way. But if they say that would be wonderful, and then, your pain point is you will be much more educated the next time we have this conversation. You're not coming in cold. So, and then you obviously like CTA, let's do this in 2 weeks, a week, however long they feel they'll need to get through it. But for me, that just seems like a wonderful way to warm prospects up to that what you're trying to bring them into, your community, your pitch, whatever.
I love that change of perspective, that reframing from episodes to assets. And that's making me wonder, Rob and Matt, whether we should start talking to our clients that we create pillar assets for them rather than pillar episodes, to borrow from that.
I was wondering how strategic you are about the repurposing of podcast material. Is it like you've got this podcast and you go, okay, well, what else can we do with this? Or is there a clearer plan of like, okay, these are the questions that people are asking at the outset. We're going to build a more robust system around it, if you like.
We're very deliberate, again, going back to the asset model as opposed to the episode model. So we have content calendars and we have, themes in terms of what we're discussing for entrepreneurs, because we want to keep things fresh. But when someone says, you see on LinkedIn, you see on Twitter, whatever, when someone's like, I have a new episode, you should go listen to my new episode. You're proud of it because it's the new episode, and whoever edited the episode is proud because it's the new episode. It's the new thing. And that's wonderful. Nobody really cares if it's a new episode. You're the only one who cares if it's the new episode. They only care if it's relevant to that which they want to hear about in this moment. So if you have a new episode, you got to listen to this because it's new. It's brand new. You got to go find it. It's new. You're the only one who cares. if you were to post something that is relevant to what's going on in the world or that entrepreneur's time frame in that moment, they would be much more likely to go and listen to that because it is speaking to and touching on that which they're thinking about in this moment. So we have the benefit at Coach of having, all of our shows were launched way before I got to coach it in 2018, and most of the shows were online already. They were, chugging along, disorganized in Dan's own words, and that's why I came here. If we have a theme for a month, for example, like powering the future of entrepreneurs or burnout, we have a wonderful catalog of assets to draw from that would be perfectly suited to those themes that we would be sharing, that would align with what we're trying to share and what we're trying to explain, what we're trying to educate the entrepreneurs that we're pitching. So we don't necessarily focus on go listen to this episode because it's new. I look at what we're trying to accomplish this month, drawing from our asset archive, our bank, and then making sure that those shows are tailored to what we're trying to share. So, in a roundabout way, it's like I don't focus very much on what's new. Certainly, like new has a caveat. People are like, "Oh, this is new. Like you have to listen to this." But
unless you're doing like political commentary or something, where there is a time frame to it.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the shows that we do are more kind of asset driven, of like answering questions that maybe are evergreen or almost evergreen.
Yeah, and it just depends on what the point of your show is. Like I said, if you're doing a comedy show where it's just like a stream of thought, someone's trying to be funny, that's great. Like those are like sort of sequential. That's a series. I don't know how, and so if someone's doing political commentary in a comedy kind of thing, then sharing an episode that would be 3 years old would kind of be old news, and nobody would really care because you're talking about things that are old. But if you're posting these with a mindset of being evergreen, where you could use these later, and that's how we edit. I've told our editor to make sure these are evergreen so we can share them today, tomorrow, and 4 years in the future. We edit our shows with that caveat in mind to make sure that these would be appropriate because these are assets that we use to sell our program. These are not vanity projects. Podcasting is fun, right? So people forget sometimes that there's a purpose for it, and we're trying to engage successful, talented, ambitious entrepreneurs to, take a greater interest in Strategic Coach. But we have a lot of fun doing them. So sometimes you forget, like, oh yeah, these are tools that we're using to sell the program. That's kind of our mindset going into it, is like, let's make sure these things are relevant for a very long time.
Mm. And what about I think part of Rob's question was about the repurposing of the audio content. Do you have like strategies and systems around that, or do you just focus on the audio content, and other parts of Strategic Coach handle other forms of media?
We do repurpose because you do not want to disappear for weeks on end. People are fickle. Listeners are fickle. And if you're not putting things out, Dan has 11 podcasts. It's excessive.
I feel slightly stressed about that, just hearing about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to be in a few years, and Pete's going to be like stressing me out with all of these requests.
He's got 11. He's got 11 shows. It's too much.
One question that comes to mind with that is why does one company have 11 podcasts?
Good question, Peter. He loves starting new podcasts. Dan loves the new. He loves the new and the exciting. For me to single one out and say, this one can go, it would be like me telling one of my kids they're ugly. So I would never do that. But we have a lot of shows. Dan loves launching podcasts, and so we do our best to maintain that which he has launched. So when an occasion would arise where he doesn't have an opportunity to record with a certain individual for a time, we do use those replays. You can call them replays. I call them rewinds. I do rewind and then colon, and then in one of our favorite episodes, whether it is or is not, you can repackage and repurpose those assets because you do want to maintain a consistent schedule. You don't do not. if you're podcasting, do not disappear for 2 months. Do not, because you're going to lose. Everybody's going to walk away and you're going to have to start all over again.
How do you encourage people to come back? Is it just you show up in the podcast app, or do you have like an email list that you notify them as well? Or
We have a list, but we don't encourage them to come back because we never go away. We just always have something every 3 weeks, whether it's a replay, whether it's something that we've repurposed and repackaged. You just need to be consistent, because with the volume that Dan has right now and the fact that he's speaking with other entrepreneurs who are just as busy as him, maybe they can't get together for a period of time, we always make sure that we're there, we're present, and something's popping up on their device at least once every 3 weeks. I wish it was every 2 weeks, but there's just too many podcasts to do that. But you have to be consistent, and consistency, you just have to be there, because if you disappear for a month and a half, people will assume that you've left or you've stopped, and they go away. And how to get them back, it's like starting all over again. So be consistent.
And I guess that's assuming that you have made the decision to have an ongoing podcast series. You're not just focusing on the 4 assets that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, the book ones we were pretty clear for our goals in terms of those ones. We knew they were going to be mini-series, but the recurring shows that Dan does with his partners, yeah, those are ongoing.
Me down in the corner here is just exploding with all the podcast stuff that you're mentioning. So I've got a lot of questions that I want to ask you, but I'm going
that's got a
to
list.
keep it nice and succinct, because I'm the podcast guy who's been doing podcast stuff for quite a while from both the technical and the structural perspective. But the thing that I'd like to point out that I really enjoyed that you mentioned, Gord, is the next level up that most people who want to start a podcast don't think about, because they get mired in the logistical guru stuff that flies out on the internet. Like you said, they feel like they have to start a podcast, so it has to run in perpetuity until the sun explodes and absorbs our universe. And they have to show up every single week, and they have to do it on the week, and they have to share the link to let everyone know that there's a new episode out there. What's in it? Who knows? But here's the link. Like there's all of this logistical stuff that people get absorbed in and feel like they have to do. But what I love that you said is that there's a next level above that. Like no matter what kind of podcast you're doing, but particularly for a business-oriented podcast, the strategy that you take, the way that you think about the use of the assets, the level above just deploying and using the podcast, the less reactive modality of attacking, getting the show out there, treating it as assets as opposed to episodes, keeping it evergreen, all those things most people don't think about, because these days, with how it's getting saturated, most of it is, I want a podcast because podcast is good for business. Go make me podcast. Podcast, yes, done. And then they don't think about an episode again because they've released it and that's all they have to do, right? I love that you've got that whole ecosystem around it. So I guess the question that belies that is that if you wanted to give someone a piece of advice who's thinking about starting a podcast for their business, presuming they haven't listened to everything we've talked about so far, what is the one thing that you would say to them to push them to think about that extra level, as opposed to starting to look up which microphone they should buy, as Rob mentioned, the books that should be sitting in the background of their video shot, all those logistical things that invariably don't add as much value as what you've been talking to us about today?
Great question. I get asked this a lot. And the answer is, do you have something to say? Now, I'm going to shatter minds here, but I want to suggest something that most people don't think about. And I get invited on podcasts from time to time. I'll do like maybe 10 a year, people who want this kind of advice. Are you entertaining? So let's forget about all the things. I mean, we've already covered, the asset model as opposed to the episode model. And what would I tell someone who wants to start a podcast? So, I mean, the basics are, do you have things to talk about? Are there things that you go over and over and over again in your business? If we're doing like straight up business podcasting, are you boring? Are you, because, here's like the weird kind of like sickly elephant in the room. It's like there's a reason why when you turn on the radio, that guy is on the radio, that woman is on the radio, because they've spent a lifetime, an entire career, decades even, learning how to construct a story and construct a narrative, ideally be funny, but to engage people in a way that would make others want to listen to them. And it's a skill. And just because you can go and buy a plastic microphone on Amazon for $3 and you can plug it into your computer, it doesn't mean that you can do that properly. So when something is easy, people assume that it's simple, but that's not the case. Broadcasting is a skill. Engaging an audience is a skill. That's why the people who are on morning radio, who've been doing it for 30 years, are there, because they're better at it than some garbage man you would pick off the street who would not know how to craft the story or not know how to keep people's attention for a certain period of time. So that's why, like, I'm not suggesting that everybody should start a podcast, because some people should not start a podcast. All of us here today know people who are just painfully boring, can't tell a story. No, it's true. They're painfully boring. They can't tell a story. They get lost. They get lost in their thought. They ramble. You should probably not start a podcast, because this is not the venue for you. This is not the avenue for you. You should start maybe thinking about like Instagram reels or whatever. So ask yourself this painful and honest question. Am I entertaining? Because don't forget, when you put a podcast episode out and it's an hour long, you're not competing with the other 1,500 biz tech podcasts that exist online in that moment. You're competing with all the other things that people could be doing with that hour of their time. That's the reality. If doom scrolling Twitter is more entertaining, or flipping through TikTok is more entertaining than your 1 hour podcast, guess who's going to win? So I listen to a lot of business podcasts, and because that's what I do and that's what I'm responsible for here at Strategic Coach. And one of the things that I think is sorely lacking is, where is the entertainment? Yes, you're giving information. Yes, you're giving insight. Yes, you're giving details, but
it's like being force-fed dry bread.
Yeah, it's like eat this bag of croutons. They're very dry. I'm just going to keep feeding, but like you need sustenance. That's like, Rob, that's a great example. It's like you're very hungry right now. I'm going to give you
really
a bag.
nutritious, and you need it to grow. It's like, oh, no,
right? Like I'm just going to take this handful of rice and I'm going to shove it in your mouth, and your stomach is going to cook it for you, and you're going to get some sustenance. Those are the calories you need, like as you're starving. So, and the person who would be starving would be like, yes, I need this, but it's not very good. So can you be entertaining? And I know that not everyone's funny. Not everyone has that kind of thing. And I'm not saying I'm the funniest guy in the world, but I believe maybe in some alternate reality, like I'm probably more entertaining than the average baboon, just with the way I construct my thoughts and the way that I speak. And I try to be entertaining, and I try to, on my show with Dan, Podcast Payoffs, shameless plug, we have a few laughs throughout every program, and we say some oddball things and weird things, because I feel like people need to be entertained throughout the shows and not just be given dry information, Rob, like you mentioned, because like it's like you're force feeding them bread.
You can't educate without also entertaining, because you're not going to hold their attention.
Like there you go. Yeah. Like there's your gold coin, gentlemen. If you can educate, and you can also be entertaining by being funny, if you can. Like I said, not everything that comes out of my mouth is hysterical. Like I have way more flops than I do, but I try. Like I'm throwing things out there. I'm trying to be engaging. I'm trying to be energetic. I'm trying to present the things that we're trying to present in a way that I feel would have someone want to continue listening above and beyond the information they're getting. Try to be entertaining if you can. just try, because so many business podcasts are so boring.
I think we're all storytellers, and I think it's something you can learn, but it takes practice, and you're probably going to suck at it to begin with. And
Sure.
you'll waffle on, and you won't know where to end or how to structure it correctly. But I think
Yeah.
it is something you can learn at the same time.
Yep. You get better by doing it.
Yeah, I wonder whether the essence of what you're talking about Gord goes back to that story you were telling us about your interview with Dan, that you were talking about and sharing personal stories. That there's that if you just focus on the dry information, you don't reveal anything about yourself. That kind of gets in the way eventually, doesn't it? We've got to be real. We're humans. We're connecting with other humans.
Yeah. And like I said, one of the worst things is we've all been to parties where someone is desperately trying to be funny and they're just not funny. So they're pushing it and they're pushing it. And that's not good either. So, like, how do you know if you're entertaining? I don't know. I just feel like you should throw some things at the wall and see what happens. So, like you were talking about the last interview with Dan, and allow me to be entertaining for a moment. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about how my grandfather, Toby Vickman, got his driver's license in 1945 in Sudbury, Ontario. He walked downtown as a 15-year-old boy. This was a long walk. And there was a guy who had a Ford model, whatever, who would just park on the side, and he always had a cigarette in his mouth. So you walked up to this guy and you said, "I want my driver's license." And the guy's like, "Get in the car." And then you get in the car. And then I said, "What happened next?" He goes, "Well, here's what happened." He told me, "Put the car in drive." So I did. And then he told me, "Drive up that hill." So I did. And then he told me, "Turn around." So I did. And then he told me, "Drive down the hill." So I did. And then he asked me if I wanted a cigarette. So I did. I smoked one. And then he said, "Put the car in park." If there is a park. I've never driven a Ford Model T2 or whatever. He said, put the car in park. So I did. And then he said, "Toby, you're a great driver." And then he gave me a piece of paper, and now I can drive a car. By the way, he lied, and he was 14. He wasn't 16. And I'm like, it wasn't so long ago that things were so completely messed up and screwed up. That's how you got your driver's license in the 1940s. You just walk up to like a smoking alcoholic guy who's probably sitting in his car, like drinking out of his flask, and you drive up a hill and you turn around and then you come down the hill, and then you are allowed to be the pilot of a motor vehicle that could very easily end the life of a lot of people if you make the wrong decision. So that's it. And I told Dan, and he's like, "Yeah, that sounds very similar to how my father got his driver's license." And where am I going with this? I don't even know. I'm just trying to be entertaining.
It props up similar stories though. Like I was thinking, like my granddad once told me how he got his motorbike license.
Yeah.
In Liverpool, it's a similar thing. And he went to a guy. He said, "Right, ride around the block, and at some point, I'm going to jump out on you, and you have to do an emergency stop." And that was it. It's like, okay, off you go. But you telling that story about me thinking about that story, so it creates that. I think that's how it works. It creates that kind of connection.
Yeah, like what I'm suggesting is, can you weave in storytelling? Because this is what connects us as humans. We're all here. We're all alive. We're all on Riverside right now because somebody in our lineage, and you know what? If you go back far enough, I guarantee the four of us are related. If you go back far enough, we clearly are. We have a distant mother, if you go back far enough. But we're all here because at some point, somebody said to somebody, "You know what, Grok? I don't think you should go to that tree right now because there's a saber-toothed tiger over there and he's probably going to eat your throat." Okay, I won't. Or somebody said to somebody, "You know those berries on that tree that look really delicious? They're big and, plush and blue. Yeah, they killed somebody over there, so don't eat those." Like storytelling is the reason why we're all here. It was the narrative before we had written language. We were grunting at each other. And that is baked so deeply in our DNA that we crave it. that will never go away. I mean, even as AI takes over and we all have chips in our brain and we're all like automatons or cyborgs or whatever, I don't feel like storytelling is going away at any point. People crave it. You know, what Dan does in workshops is it's really interesting. If things are going sideways, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes people will question him or they'll ask him, you know, like, can you define that a little bit better than you have? Or maybe two people are having a little bit of a back and forth. He will always say, let me tell you a story about this. And as soon as you hear the word, let me tell you a story, everybody's listening. Can I tell you a story? Peter, can I tell you a story? Matthew, can I tell you a
Yes.
story? Rob, can I tell you a story? Everybody's listening. When you say, can I tell you a story? I think you're really going to like it. Everybody listens.
Yeah.
So package the information that you're using to help before you sell with a story. How can I use a story to explain this concept? How can I use a story to explain? And the story I told about my grandfather Toby getting his driver's license was I was not packaging any information. I was just telling a story about how completely crazy it was in the 1940s in Canada to get a driver's license. But I'm sure that a lot of people at the ending of this podcast, that might be the thing that they remember the most. It could be.
Or the interview with Dan, which is also a story.
It could be, yeah, or the interview with Dan, because we've packaged this as stories. And what we're doing, like, we are telling stories here. I'm not just barking math at you, like, well, we have 70% of this and blah, blah, blah. Nobody remembers that stuff. But wrap a story around everything you're doing. And that will help you help before you sell.
A lot of our clients, Gord, do have some aspect of resistance, I suppose is the word, that they don't see themselves as storytellers or don't think that their story matters in a sense of communicating to their ideal clients. What do you say if the listener's thinking that?
I would say, first things first, you need to get your story straight. What is your story? Because if you don't have one, you're sunk. You need to get your story straight. Tell me the story of your company. Well, you're in deep trouble. That's, entrepreneurship 101 is people want to know who you are. They want to know where you come from. They want to know what you're all about.
Can they trust you?
Can they trust you? Who do we buy from? Once again, people we like, know, and trust. We can make a song about it. You only buy from people you like, know, and trust. I got a knock on my door the other day, and I opened it, and it was someone. I don't even know why I did open my door, because normally we just don't. Someone knocks at your door. They're knocking at 6 p.m. They're knocking at your door for their reasons, not your reasons.
The police knocked on my window at 4 a.m. once, and yeah.
Oh no! What? Tell me more about that. Why were the cops? Rob? What did you do?
They were looking for my housemates who like to take crack, who just left. So yeah.
Jeez. So how long were you in jail for? So yeah, someone knocked on my door, and it was someone who would like talk about Jesus Christ. Don't have an intimate relationship with him myself, but I'm not against it. I'm fairly, agnostic, but so I was polite to them, but I don't even know why I opened the door. I don't know. I just did it because I'm like, whatever. I opened the door. By the way, my wife and child are in Brazil right now. I married a Brazilian, and we have a son. He's 2 years old. She can work remotely, so they left to visit her parents. So I've been alone in the house for 3 weeks, just living my best life, and it's kind of lonely.
With the 15 bikini-clad babes, yeah.
With the 15 bikini-clad babes. So
they're all stuffed in the cupboard.
I'm normally a dad. I'm in beast mode all the time because the kid wants everything, and then you have to be that person. Like, I'm a very attentive father. Feel like I'm a good husband. I'm still married, so I must be a fairly good husband. But when someone knocked on the door, I got excited because I'm like, finally, someone to talk to. because it's like, otherwise it's like talking to the walls. We had a cat who passed away last summer, so I don't even have him to keep me company anymore. So someone knocks on the door, and then I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. So knock on the door, I open it up. I was like, hello, another person. And then it's like, hello, can we talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ? I'm like, you bet. Tell me more. So I listened to her for a long time, and then she started her pitch. Like, I listened to the story, and then I knew the pitch wasn't going to work. So I listened to the story about Jesus and whatever, and I was like, okay, yeah, he's a good guy, like great hair, nice beard, seemed pretty buff. He was, looked good. He was
Bit of a
fit.
rebel.
Yeah, like he was fit, and like he was a good-looking guy for 2,000 years ago. Seemed to have good nutrition, and then she went into like, well, can I come in? I was like, well, no, we're not going there. And then the door closed. I said goodbye. And then I was like, my marketing brain started thinking, what if I were her? What could I have said to get into my own house? So I'm literally going back on her script and I'm rewriting it in my head. And then I got it. And then I almost like ran outside and I was like, did you know if you said this, I probably would have let you into my house? And then again, because my wife and child are not in my home right now, that would be super weird to let this strange woman talking about Jesus into my home. Awkward. But my brain can't help but think of ways to change the way you're presenting that message to appeal to a greater audience. I'll give you one more example. We have a government-controlled liquor store empire monopoly here in Ontario, Canada. So we have the LCBO. The acronym is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. Sounds very official, right, guys? So this is the only place. If I'm not a hard liquor drinker, I just don't like it. Makes me feel whiskey makes me want to fight, and then I just don't want to drink it. I haven't touched it in like 25 years. So we have a Liquor Control Board of Ontario. Sounds very, official. So this is where you go to get your booze, and they're always doing a charity drive of some kind. So you go there and you have your 6-pack of beer, which is the only place you can buy beer in Ontario. Is the Liquor Control Board, and they always say something like, you have this like kind of like dour, frumpy woman sitting down. She has like the carpal tunnel wrist guards on. She's like, do you want to donate to the women's hospital? And everybody always says no. They're like, no, no, no. So one time I went in there. I had a few drinks in me when I went in there, and they did the same thing. Do you want to donate to the whatever? And I said, can I give you a tip? She goes, what? I said, be specific about that which you want the money for. So here's what you can say. The Women's College Hospital is trying to buy a new MRI machine. They are just a little bit short. Would you be willing to help them today by donating just $2? We're going to get there faster with your help. She's like, she's like, okay. And then I walked out. I was like, okay, that was stupid but I'm like, stop giving marketing advice to people who work at a liquor store. Just stop it. But my brain can't help doing this because it's like, help before you sell. The messaging, the medium is the message, unless it's not, because you're not giving people enough of an inspiration to donate based on the way that you're saying. That was a total loose brain ramble, gentlemen. I don't know if I hope that was entertaining, if it was not informative, but I hope that I answered all your questions. I don't even know what your questions were, but I just wanted to help you. I had a Jehovah's Witness at my door and I harassed a woman at the liquor store. So good for me, I guess.
Well, I think yeah. I mean, I was entertained and I was focused on the story. And I think the biggest takeaway is that you can be attempting to say the same thing, but it's how you package it. It's the story you tell around it. That's the most important thing.
The meaning can be whatever you want as well. Like, you could transition into pretty much any message and make it relevant. Like there is going to be a connection there somewhere. I think people tend to assume that, the story has to directly relate to the message that I'm trying to get across. And it's like, well, actually, we could probably find a connection between the two things.
Yeah. And, like I said, I preach this all the time about the entertainment factor because most people don't realize that you're not competing. Like, I just want to reiterate what I said. It's like, you're not competing against the other podcasts out in the atmosphere that would be discussing the similar things to what you're discussing. You're actually competing against all the other things. And it's tough. Holy smokes, it's tough because there's so many things that people could be doing. You have to really, really convince them that this is what they should be doing right now. And there's so many shows and there's so many other distractions and there's so many things to have that expectation that people are going to spend time with you. My sense is, and again, this is something that no one in the industry besides me is harping on or talking about. And I sound like I'm, like patting myself on the back, but I've been saying this for years. It's like, you need to be entertaining. Why is my show not growing? Because it's fucking boring. Sorry, pardon my French.
Everyone's got great information. Like, there's no shortage of great information.
Yeah, like everyone's got great information. Like, there's financial advisors who have made billions of dollars and they can present that information. But if they're just like dry toast, I'm sorry, but people are not going to stick with you because otherwise it's like everyone can. We've all here been to university or college, or even you think back to your high school. Like, you can just think about the most boring professor or teacher you've ever had. You don't pay attention. You're carving, you're carving into the desk with a knife. You're writing. You're throwing things at people. You have great information. You want to share this with the world. Can you be entertaining in some capacity while you're doing that? I think like that's your golden ticket, is give people a reason to join you, not only for the information you're giving them, because that information likely is available in a few other places, but if you can be engaging and entertaining while you're doing that, you have a really good path to success in podcasting. Well, how do I do that, Gord? Storytelling. Tell stories. Package your information in stories. If you're not good at it yet, like Rob, you were saying, it's like, well, what if people aren't good at it? It's like, write it, like script it out. And I don't mean read it from a piece of paper on the podcast, but actually sit down and plan. Okay, I want to share how, you can go from blah, 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 to blah, 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 this investment strategy. So I sat down last week with my friend Bob, and Bob had a problem. Make it humanize it and make it relatable so people can put themselves in that story as opposed to just barking math at people constantly. And I just feel like so many business podcasts right now are all about information, and they're not entertaining. And I begrudgingly sit through them because I just want to know what they're doing, but it's painful for me. And then the ones that actually, the people that actually tell stories are the ones that I want to go back to over and over. So storytelling is king. It will always be king until we've been overtaken by AI and we're all robots. Tell stories.
And in our world, just circling back, and we are circling back at this stage because I've got my one eye on the clock. If you're not super confident of doing it on your own, then in conversation is a lot easier to be entertaining and to tell stories in conversation than it is on your own. So find a good conversation partner. Find somebody who can be the kind of person that Dan saw in you. Being able to hold a conversation.
And I mean, what I'm saying right now, I'm not scolding people. I'm not trying to discredit. I'm not trying to shame anyone, because what we're doing right now, gentlemen, is like, we are having a conversation that we are attempting to have a natural sound in a very unnatural environment. Like, it's very unnatural. Like, if the four of us were sitting around a table at a pub right now with a pint, we'd be having a conversation and it would be loosey-goosey and we'd be laughing and we'd be chirping each other and we'd be doing that. And it would just feel kind of normal. But here we are, we're on the internet. We have expensive microphones in front of our faces. So what you're trying to do on a podcast, it's like you're trying to have a natural sounding, free-flowing, entertaining conversation in the most unnatural, unsettling for a lot of people environments possible. You got a microphone in front of your face. You have a Focusrite box. Like, everything just feels weird. And it's almost like as soon as you put a microphone in front of someone, then everything it's like now it has gravitas.
Suddenly they're reading the news.
Yeah, it's like it's really important now because I have a microphone. So if you took all this shit away from us and we were just sitting around a table at a pub somewhere in the UK, ideally, because I love going. So we would be having like a totally goofy conversation. We'd be like, like punching each other in the arm. It would be natural and normal, probably have a great time. But then you put a microphone in front of someone's face, and then they feel there's almost like this like mitochondria of seriousness that emerges when you put this gear in front of someone, where they feel that there's like, again, like, this is serious business. I have a microphone and it's $500, so I have to be serious. But no, you don't. And you can, like I said, going back to the broadcaster, why is the morning radio guy on the radio and not the garbage man? Because he's good at it and he's been doing it for 25 years, or she's been doing it for 25 years. There's wonderful broadcasters. It just takes a lot of time to get good at. So just because there's gear in front of you, it doesn't mean that everything has to be so serious and formal. And I'm not suggesting that if you're talking about serious things on your show that you make it like, I don't know, you make it goofy. You can.
Gord, maybe I can help thread the needle a little bit for you here. Pete was right on. Like, the conversation is the important bit, I think. Setting up the situation where you sit around the table at a pub having pints with $500 microphones in front of you, you'd hope that the nature of the conversation being entertaining at the same time, as well as capturing the essence that you want to deliver to the audience, all of that happens. But it is so incredibly hard to do it in a vacuum. And everything that you have talked about that has you delivering unusual marketing tips to people who don't want to hear them, or people getting their driver's license probably when they shouldn't. All of these things are done in conversation with people. And to my mind, podcasting is one of those mediums, as you said, without rules, but it is such an intimate medium that allows you to, as you say, fend off the attention of the laundry or the kids screaming in the background, which maybe you should be talking to, but maybe not. Maybe this podcast is so entertaining and educational, you can't pull yourself away. But the key to capturing that essence really is doing it in conversation with other people. And I think if the person listening to this right now was going to take anything away from this conversation, I think it should be that. Whether it's a conversation with you, Gord, with Rob, our conversation specialist at Activate Your Podcast, or even with a friend, just to bounce the ideas around and see what the feeling is like. Whatever the subject matter is, entertainment in a medium dealing with trauma, that's going to be a hard line to walk. But every podcast is going to demand whatever it demands of it. But the thing in common across all those things are being in conversation. I think it really just, it pulls out what that podcast needs and the ability for you to connect with the person who's listening. At the very least, that's what I've drawn from what you've been talking to us.
Am I hearing from the horse's mouth that the conversation is more important than the editing? Sometimes.
And an audible conversation with someone, between two tin cans with a piece of string, I don't know. But, when you got $500 microphones, we don't have to worry about that so much longer.
It's a beautiful medium. And, I'm biased because I love audio and I love radio and I love podcasting, but it's theater of the mind, right? You're painting the picture in the listener's mind. Everyone listening to the show right now, picture a fox. Stop picturing a fox. You can't do it. You still have a fox in your mind because I suggested to you, think of a fox. Think of whatever. Picture a giraffe. Okay, well, we just put that picture in everyone's mind. And they can't get it out, even if we tell them to. And podcasting, one of the things I just want to leave with, because I know we have to wrap up, is like, podcasting has its own strengths. Podcasting is what you consume and enjoy when your eyeballs are busy. I'll say it again. Podcasting is what you enjoy when your eyeballs are busy. Podcasting cannot or should not try and compete with video or TikTok, because that's called like an active. Okay, this is active consumption. Podcasting is what we enjoy when our eyeballs are busy, when we're driving, when we're showering, when we're cleaning the toilet, when we're doing all those other things. It's education when your eyeballs are busy. It's entertainment when your eyeballs are busy. And that's what we do best. So we need to double down on that, because there's a push right now for everyone to get involved in video podcasting. I think video podcasting is fun. It's fine, but it's not a podcast, it's a television show. So if you have the wherewithal and you have the team and you have the money to produce a television show, then go for it. But there's an interesting story that I heard. It was Bill Maher. So he's a Democratic political commentator in the United States. He does commentary. He's a comedian, but he's interesting because he sees both sides of it. He wanted to do a YouTube channel. So he wanted to do a YouTube show. So he said, I want to do a YouTube show. I'm not interested in podcasting. I want to do a YouTube show. So we did a YouTube show. Some enterprising young person, no idea who it was, said, I'm going to export the audio from these videos he's doing. I'm going to create an RSS feed. I'm just going to put the audio up on the internet. I'll just make a podcast. He doesn't even have to know. He didn't want a podcast. He just wanted a YouTube channel. So they did that. And then after a short period of time, the audio only version, which was just exported, had about 8 to 10 times the listenership of the actual YouTube channel because people wanted to consume when their eyeballs were busy. They wanted to hear what Bill had to say, but they didn't want to sit there watching him. And he had, and everybody on his production team had it reversed. They're like, people want to watch me on video right now. And whoever decided to just export the audio and put it up, like, why not? What does it hurt? It doesn't cost anything. It's like $5 a month to have a podcast online. They did that. And the podcast ended up having, from the people I spoke to who were involved in his production, 8 to 10 times of the audience, 8 to 10 times the audience of the people who actually watched his video.
I think it's incredibly fitting that we're coming to the end of our conversation and you finish with a story, Gord, in light of what we've been talking about on this episode. On behalf of the listener and Rob and Matt and myself, thank you so much for sharing your deep expertise and for entertaining us for a little short while. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you.
My pleasure, gentlemen, and I hope you were entertained. I hope you were informed and entertained, and you could flip those in any order you want. Entertaining, probably first, but informed as well. And if I had a good mix of that, then that was my recipe today. And it was a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I had a lot of fun. So thank you very much for having me, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Help Before You Sell, sponsored by Activate Your Podcast. To activate your podcast and help the people who most need you and your services, head to activateyourpodcast.com/help. If you found this episode helpful, please also leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And remember, help more to sell more. See you next time.